This is a story you won't hear from the mainstream media. The grave consequences of haphazard migrant policies playing out in Western schoolyards. Syrian migrant students throwing rocks at their Canadian peers, beating up the girls in their classrooms, uttering death threats to teachers who don't believe in Allah. Now, for some viewers, this might feel like deja vu. Well, that's because over the past 6 months, we here at the Rebel Media have brought you 2 different stories involving trends of Syrian migrants abusing their Canadian classmates right here on taxpayer-funded school ground. The first story was out of Nova Scotia. Syrian migrant boys in an elementary school choking, slapping, and threatening little girls in their classrooms. We talked to parents and students from that school who told a consistent story about a system of double standards where Syrian students receive no consequences for their violent behavior, even as teachers lack the resources needed to properly deal with the migrant crisis unfolding in their classrooms. The second story was one we broke out of New Brunswick, and it made international headlines. This time, though, grown Syrian men in their 20s were found to be enrolled in a Canadian high school, some of them in classes with children as young as 14. At Fredericton High School, email exchanges between teachers told a story of Syrian migrant men bullying the younger Canadian boys in the school, especially the Jewish ones, and referring to their genitalia, only in Arabic, in front of the younger girls. Other emails expressed concern over Syrian students counting rocket-propelled grenades among their hobbies and interests. Another email told of migrant, quote, excitement following the Brussels bombings. And just like in Nova Scotia, the staff in New Brunswick expressed a lack of resources to properly deal with the new reality in their classrooms, though they did manage to find the resources necessary to plan a gender apartheid Muslim prayer room in their publicly funded secular school. In both cases, responsiveness from school officials ranged from unwillingness to cooperate all the way to a full-blown cover-up in the case of Chebucto Heights and Halifax. And in both cases, the mainstream media seemed to operate under a self-imposed gag order. Too afraid of appearing xenophobic, most didn't even dare to report the evidence, even if it meant young students and worn-out teachers might be at risk. Well, just because the mainstream media was satisfied to retreat to their respective safe spaces didn't mean we here at the Rebel were about to do the same. Real journalism involves asking the tough questions and presenting the facts, no matter where they might lead. And you know, there was one question I just couldn't shake. If 2 Canadian schools are experiencing the same character of violence and bullying being carried out by their Syrian migrant students, I couldn't help but wonder, are there even more schools facing the exact same fate? And if so, how many more? And are some of the cases even worse than what we have seen to date? So, we here at the Rebel.media sent access to information requests to several Canadian school boards, asking for any evidence of issues or concerns involving the new Syrian student migrant population. Now, I can tell you, after having combed through the evidence that we've received just to date, the situation across the nation is alarming, and it requires urgent media and political attention. There are, frankly, too many documents to depict in just one video here, and so over the course of the next 3 days, I will focus on one region per a day, so to properly present each one of them in turn. Up first, tonight's focus, Battleground, Alberta. Fresh documents the Rebel Media has obtained from Calgary's Board of Education. We received just shy of 60 pages, far less than the 2,700 we got in Fredericton, but that's to be expected because in this case, in Calgary, we're dealing at the board level, not the school level. In other words, the documents you are about to see include instances that were so bad in the eyes of the individual schools that they felt it necessary to contact the board. To be sure, at the time of filming this, I have yet to receive comment from the Calgary Board of Education. I did reach out to them, In fact, I moved my entire deadline. I pushed it back. I delayed getting this story out to the public so that the board could comment. Alas, I'm still waiting. So for now, the Calgary Board of Education's internal emails will have to do the talking for them. Emails like this one that lists just a few of the teachers' concerns when it comes to their new Syrian migrant students. Concerns that include the Syrian students cursing in Arabic, inappropriate student contact, and a, quote, culture of intimidation. Teachers say that it's a cultural behavior and a personal choice, not a result of trauma. The boys and girls also frequently refuse to work together. But I know what you're thinking. At first blush, you figure swearing, boys refusing to do the work with girls, that's just kids being kids. But that one line about inappropriate student contact and a culture of intimidation, yeah, there's a little more to that part of the story. Throughout the 60 pages of documents, records upon records of the Syrian students beating up the little Canadian boys in their classrooms and on the schoolyard. Like this email concerning one of the migrant students enrolled in grade 5. During soccer today, one of the Syrian migrants got upset at a student. He picked up a rock and threw it at the student, who ducked, and another student was hit in the face. We administered ice and the victim was okay by the end of the day, but had a black bruise on his upper right cheek. Important to note here, no indication was made in the report as to whether that child's guardian had been contacted after the incident, or I don't know, if he was brought into the principal's office for reprimand. You know, the sort of disciplinary action that you'd expect if any other elementary school kid had just thrown a rock at a classmate's head. That same email describes how the Arabic-speaking students fight amongst themselves, too. The students shout in Arabic, and one migrant student goes at them fist-pounding. Students have to be physically separated, and the Syrian student in question stays in a heightened, angered state for well over an hour after each incident and needs to be monitored closely. He will pace and mutter in Arabic. Today he got upset with another student outside during soccer. He got in a pushing match in line. He was separated, and both boys came inside and sat down in the classroom. 15 minutes later, he got up and went over to the other student's desk and started hitting him in the head with his fists. Again, no word on disciplinary actions taken, if any. And talk about a culture of intimidation. Just look at this email concerning one student just in grade 2. During recess supervision, a grade 2 student came to me upset that he had been punched in the head by one of the Syrian migrants. When I questioned the Syrian student, he yelled no, but the other grade 1 and 2 boys all said yes, it was the Syrian student. And then they did the actions so that I would understand what happened. The Syrian student became very upset at the students and moved towards the students who accused him. He stood as close as he could in their faces and started speaking in Arabic. And it would seem violent incidents aren't just documented for the older migrant students. Some of the emails obtained from the Calgary Board of Education, well, it talks about aggressive behavior from Syrian students as young as 5 or 6 years old, just in first grade. Like this one. There have been several incidents where he has hurt a classmate or another student from rough physical play. As a consequence, he has had to spend time either in the classroom or in Miss Sagru's office during recess. The parents were notified about these concerns and voiced their support, but believed that the boy is being influenced by the other Syrian students. Yeah, but it's not just the migrant boys beating up other boys. Some of the Syrian students get physical with the little girls, too. Like this email from one principal detailing migrant behavior at Annie Foot School in Alberta. Yesterday, I had the mother of another child in grade 1 at the office complaining about the rough treatment that these same boys in the grade 1 class directed her daughter, who is Muslim and speaks a little Arabic. We have basically decided to separate these two sets of children because of our lack of success with mitigating the boys' violent behavior. In fact, in that same email, the principal says that the boys' parents were called, but their violent tendencies didn't change, and so the school had to double their supervisors on the playground. So much for recess being the best part of the kids' day, I guess. And it seems that recess isn't the only time boys and girls are being separated in Calgary. One teacher describes how, in the eyes of certain Syrian students, some classes, say like home ec, aren't for the little men in their school. Serving at attention with me at lunch today, the Syrian students were supposed to be in foods class during period 2 today. Instead, they were wandering the hallways for 10 minutes. Once they were redirected to foods class, they were sent back because they spent another 15 minutes doing absolutely nothing, refusing to participate. The Arabic-speaking education assistant also went to the class. They are being withdrawn from foods class because it doesn't seem that they want to participate anyway, and will not be given another option class. They said, "This is a woman's work, not for men. This is ongoing behavior that interrupts the daily activities in our classes." So the boys think that the class is a woman's work, and the school's response is to just pull them from the class rather than demanding their participation. I suppose a lot's changed in elementary school since I was enrolled in one. Now, apart from the physical violence and the issues between the genders in the classroom, the most common behavioral thread from the documents we received were issues surrounding conflict of a religious nature. Some of the boys in our Syrian student cohort are setting up conflict based on religious beliefs. I propose a system-created way of responding to this and of teaching our values. It's very sensitive, and we are unteaching foundational beliefs. Another teacher wrote about how she had to talk to the psychologist attached to the Syrian refugee students about the idea of doing some intentional teaching around tolerance and not using religion as a place to battle. But you might be wondering, a battle against whom? The other migrant Muslim students, perhaps? Nah, it's the Christian students that the migrants don't like. As you've seen from the meeting on Friday, one of the Syrian students becomes quite emotional when his religion is discussed, yet he is not tolerant at all about the Christian students in the room. But it's not just the Christian students who are getting the brunt of the Muslim migrant students' aggression, it's unbelieving teachers too. According to one of the Syrian students enrolled in a Calgary classroom, non-believers are better off dead. As you are aware, the boys in our grade 1 and 2 cohort of Syrian refugees fight constantly. Miss Massin has been speaking with them in Arabic about the constant fighting, verbal and physical, inquiring why and directing/coaching them that they should not be doing this. Yesterday, one of the Syrian students pointed to another supervisor, Miss Naveed, motioning to the hijab she was wearing. She understands, she speaks Arabic. He said this in Arabic, as he knows that Miss Massin speaks it. She responded by saying that Miss Naveed does not understand Arabic, which surprised the migrant student. He asked Miss Massin if she was a Muslim, and she responded, no, she speaks Arabic because she grew up in an Arabic-speaking country. He said, you guys don't believe in God, so it would be better to kill you. For the record, there is a note that guardians were contacted after this incident, though you have to wonder where a child in grade 1 or 2 picks up threatening language like, you don't believe in God, so it would be better to kill you? Look, folks, I'm going to be completely candid with you. Never mind the language of cultural enrichment and tolerance, leaving aside trepidation over appearing xenophobic or bigoted. Common sense dictates that it is a problem when Syrian migrants bring a culture of violence to Canada, especially anti-girl violence and religious intolerance. But it is equally concerning when Canadian authorities, teachers, school boards, and mainstream media are too afraid to talk about it. Calgary marks the 3rd Canadian city with a Syrian schoolyard scandal. And it's time we have a conversation in this country. It's time we stop ignoring children who are being beaten and threatened at a place where they should feel safe. It's time we stop making exceptions for abuse against Canadian girls just because their perpetrators are from a particular part of the world. And it's time we stop allowing political correctness to put our children in harm's way. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldie. If you're concerned about the welfare of the West's children after sloppy Syrian migrant policies, watch my next report out of Ontario tomorrow, right here at therebel.media.